Pull yourself up a chair and join us at the Energy Roundtable.
Welcome to Energy Roundtable, and we're going to jump right in, and I have my constant guest, never fails to disappoint, Lisa Katz. Welcome to the Energy Roundtable.
Thank you very much, Matt. How you doing? I feel like I haven't seen you in a while.
It has been a while. You had some vacation, I think, and then you were at a conference this week. Let's start there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I was at the IDEA conference. So for those of you that may not be familiar with it, it stands for International District Energy Association. Very good conference. It was held in Austin, Texas. And I have to say, man, I miss seeing people. And you know what it's like with conferences, right? You know, you go and you get to see everybody in one place instead of going to different locations all the time. So, no, it was great. Great discussion. Lots of discussion about hydrogen fueled CHP. Obviously, district energy, as the IDA might suggest. Right. Lots of discussion about RNG as well, and just these kind of renewable fuels that, of course, will be used in CHP moving forward. So, yeah, it was a great conference. Great to catch up with many of the exhibitors and, of course, our friends and I'll call them family of CEMs. So, yeah, it was well worth it. I'm glad I went.
That's great. Did you have anybody that you interacted with and they're like, hey, and you totally out of context didn't know who they were?
No, but interestingly enough, I saw some old faces that I just didn't realize, where they were. So, one of the guys that I used to work with at Express Integrated Technologies, Jose, he's working for Rentec. And so I approached the booth and I saw him and I went, Jose, and I gave him a big hug and it was just really cool to see him. And then there's another gentleman that used to work for Dresser. And so this was actually when I was working for DCL. And so Jim Stanley is now working for UE Compression. And we kind of ran into each other and he went, Lisa? And I went, Jim? And so that was kind of cool to bang into some people that I didn't even realize were, in some different companies. So it's cool. Yeah, it was good.
And the big themes that we've been talking about around our different kind of discussions, they, kind of carried through. Any kind of big revelations, any kind of stuff that we haven't been talking about? Curious.
No, not really, I would say. I mean, everything we've been talking about, I think there's a lot of discussion about industrial heat pumps, a lot of discussion about from several OEMs on hydrogen fueled CHP, really good presentations from people like INEO and Baker Hughes. So it was just kind of great for people to almost reiterate what you and I have been discussing on a lot of these episodes, and sort of the information that we've been sort of putting out to our listeners. So no, I think overall it was a good show, and excited to see what the next one cool. It looks like. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us the quick recap there. Let's dive right into our articles. I will start. I have an article from the Wall Street Journal from yesterday, the 30th of September. And the headline is Biden's energy price shock. And the subheadline is his policies are already contributing to global oil supply shortages. And so the conversation is around, crude, I guess, just hit $80 a barrel, crude oil. Not an index we follow terribly much, although it does impact a lot of the stuff we have in the western part of Canada in particular. But and OPEC is signaling that it could go higher. And so the opening observation is so much for the death of crude oil and fossil fuels in general. So, it goes through kind of some of the recent, fuel shortages across all the world, really. In Europe, they're big on, they don't have their own domestic supply. So natural gas and LNG is big, and that's getting pinched. Asia and Europe are having to burn more coal to keep the lights on, but coal is also in short supply. So Goldman Sachs is really predicting that oil could hit $90 a barrel by the end of the year.
Wow.
That, for those of you driving around this weekend, that could be 10 or 20 cents a gallon. Now that's by the end of the year, but that starts to really percolate through quite a bit. So those are big dollars, right? It's funny. The article, the headline is or the picture is a gas station in Beverly Hills, California, where regular gasoline is $5 this is so interesting. It's $5 a gallon, but full serve is $6 a gallon. That's a massive delta, and I think that has to do with the issue of labor shortage. But anyways, I'm now editorializing as we go. But basically, it goes on to talk about how the big problem is that U.S. oil productions are down considerably by 15% from pre-pandemic levels. And so really the thesis of the article is that oil and crude is not going away. There's a line in the article that says Nigerians and Guatemalans won't be driving Teslas. And so the reality is global demand for these things, OPEC is predicting an 8% increase over the next 20 years. So, these policies, like it's just a reminder of how global our energy world is, and that, yes, as North Americans, we can make the decision to be, green and to really trim our supply of fossil reserves. But that's just going to trickle out elsewhere, right? So we have to really take a holistic approach if we can. But so we're starting to see that worldwide. So it's interesting. We can't be isolationist. We have to be working together as a global community. So really cool article.
Very, very interesting, and it kind of leads me into my article actually quite nicely. So the article is titled "Ultimate Irony: Climate Change Forcing Coal-Fired Comeback in Many Regions." It was issued, I think, in early September. I think it's maybe around September the 10th by Power Engineering. So for those of you who want to check it out, feel free to take a look at the link that we'll put in the notes. But essentially what they're talking about is that extreme or dramatic weather events that are kind of coming out of climate change are forcing coal to come back and sustaining gas-fired generation in many regions this year. And they kind of specify 3 different areas. So there's one in Chile where I guess some coal-fired generation was required based on a drought and the pinches that it created in the hydropower that basically almost brought it to a standstill. Wow. In Britain, the grid system was forced to re-engage the coal-fired West Burton A power plant after some hot weather stilled the wind turbines, and then gas prices went through the roof. And this past winter, as many of us know, freezing weather in the U.S. Southwest caused plants of all resources to trip offline, but coal plants stepped up to take a larger portion of the load. So it's kind of interesting, and it's a lot of, it kind of comes back to a lot of what we've discussed in the past, this resiliency, and it's nice to think about renewables and decreasing carbon, but, wind, might not work, solar might not work. And while I don't think that necessarily we want to rely on coal because there's cleaner sources like natural gas-fired power plants, it just shows why other technologies need to be used in the mix. And because I was at the IDA conference, I'll actually quote something that is in hold on a second, it's in the District Energy magazine. So for those of you that were at the show, you might have picked up a version or a copy of this. But Robert Thornton, who is the president and CEO, just using a quote.
Who wasn't there, by the way, right? He's been a guest on our podcast. Great guy. I forget which episode it was, but he was out with some back issues, right? Yeah,
and Pascal, who attended it with me, our director of cogeneration, he mentioned that he had heard somewhere that he had some sort of form of a surgery or something.
Oh, okay.
And so that was part of the reason he couldn't attend. Because when I first saw his virtual presentation come up, I thought, why is he not here? Like he should be here. But that kind of explains things. So
did you meet the replacement MC, my friend Tim?
No, I did not actually.
Okay. Yeah, he's he literally wrote the book on millennials in engineering. Literally wrote the really cool guy. Anyways, back to the District Energy magazine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's good. Interesting. But the quote basically from Robert, which I think just kind of highlights everything we've talked about and kind of goes back to this article, is the global problem of climate change will require an all of the above approach. No single technology will be sufficient. So again, we've talked about it many times, but just another reason why gas-fired power plants shouldn't necessarily be going away. Maybe they use alternative fuel sources, but just to rely on one specific technology source is really going to put us in a bad position if that's the way that we decide to go.
Yeah, you mentioned in your recap that wind doesn't work, solar doesn't work, and I think the real story is that they don't work on their own, right?
That's right.
And they obviously work. They wouldn't be built out as and that's not what you were saying. The key is that it's this complicated suite of technologies, and it's this complicated, interconnected global energy environment that we live in. So yeah, it's interesting that coal is making a comeback. So somewhere Loretta Lynn is happy about that. So in terms of different technologies and different fuels, and I'm starting to think a lot about the energy market in terms of electrons and molecules, and at CEM we really have a feel for the molecules side of the equation. So this is an article from Zacks Equity Research, I think. And the headline is Enbridge partners with Vanguard to supply RNG in the U.S. So this is the U.S. version of Enbridge, who we know well. They've partnered with Vanguard Renewables, another company that we have done some work for over the years.
Yeah.
And per the deal, Enbridge will buy more than 2 billion with a B cubic feet of RNG per year. So for those keeping track at home, that is 2 trillion BTUs per year of RNG. And it'll come from 8 of their digesters located in the Northeast, Southeast, and the Midwest of the U.S. So Vanguard will invest $200 million to build digesters, and Enbridge will invest $100 million in upgrading stations. So Enbridge is a pipeline company. They'll build the upgraders. They'll build the injection stations. Vanguard will build the upstream anaerobic digesters, and it'll be really a lot of food waste, dairy waste, organic waste. And the play here is that Vanguard really has the brand in the market. They can get access to the feedstocks. They can roll out there and talk to, they talk about Unilever, Starbucks, probably have heard of them, Dairy Farmers of America. So there's all these massive brands that Vanguard already knows. And so now they have somebody to buy the gas. What's not clear is, the price point of the gas. Like these projects don't make gas at $3 or $4 or $5 a MMBTU. But there must be some agreed upon, and they must be selling the credit, the renewable credit. So this is kind of a BFD in the biogas space as far as I'm concerned. So really exciting. Yeah,
I think that's I agree, Matt. Very, very exciting. And I think that hopefully this will set the stage for Enbridge to become, a little bit like California or a little bit like Fortis BC, where they're buying more gas from even other people. Because the more gas we get into the pipeline, the more, talking about, technologies that provide resiliency, the easier it becomes for an engine or a gas turbine, for example, to run on that RNG molecule, right? For its environmental benefits. So, it's very exciting.
It's interesting what you say there about that, because, we've been talking to clients and hearing stories like people who are consuming molecules don't want to change. For the most part, they don't want to change the devices so they don't want, the hydrogen play is going to be interesting to watch, because people, if they've been burning CH4 in a boiler to make high pressure steam, they don't really want to change that, right? At least, unless they have to at a boiler replacement juncture. So to go to electric, to go to hydrogen is going to be, so that's why RNG is exciting. Let's put it in the pipe somewhere. Let's take it out agnostic to where it came from, but get it in the pipe, pull it out as CH4 and burn it as we always have. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to watch.
Yeah, cool. So my second article, it's actually right from ATCO's website, and it's was actually only released a couple of days ago. It's on September the 29th. This was released. So ATCO Group to build Western Canada's largest urban solar project in Calgary. So the article basically talks about the ATCO Group through its investment in Canadian Utilities Limited. They announced that they will be acquiring the rights to build 2 solar installations in Calgary. And of course, they're aimed at providing clean, renewable energy to Alberta's power grid and supporting the transition to low carbon energy. These will be at the Barlow and Deerfoot solar projects, where that's what they're being called. It'll be the largest solar installation in a major urban center in Western Canada. And from a megawatt perspective, it'll be 27 and 37 megawatts, respectively. So pretty big. And the announcement also follows ATCO's recent acquisition of a solar project near Empress in eastern Alberta, and the completion of 2 solar projects in Canada's north. So exciting news, I think, from ATCO. Obviously, from a megawatt perspective, we're getting, that's pretty big. And I think the reason I really just like the article is when we think about ATCO, either as the utility or their non-regulated side, they're really stepping up to this resiliency piece, and they're actually acquiring and interested in investing in, multiple assets and technologies, which is really cool. So, for those of you that may not be paying, a lot of attention to the news, they've got lots of RNG projects going on. They've got, obviously the solar. There's lots going on in the, under the ATCO umbrella, and I think that makes it very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Do they say if it's ground mounted or roof mounted?
I believe this is ground mounted. It's the picture, at least, that they show in the article. It's showing ground mounted solar, and it's occupying quite a bit of space. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, when I heard urban, I just assumed roof mounted, right? So if it's ground mounted, I mean, there is a lot of unusable space, I think, in Calgary because of elevation changes and things like that. So very cool. Very good. Well, thank you for sharing your articles with us. And let's move to the final segment of our roundtable, which is our Faceoff. Insert graphic. This graphic here. Mark, welcome to the roundtable.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm well. How are you guys?
I'm good.
Good. So, Face-Off, pros and cons. I think by now most people should know what happens here. We pick a topic, flip a coin, and today, who called last time? I think
I did.
Okay, well then we'll let Matt call heads or tails.
Heads.
It is tails.
Ah.
You know why this happened? Because normally he calls tails and I call heads, so this is why it happened.
Heads always wins. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So today's topic, which I don't even think I mentioned, was free healthcare. I guess we should put in quotations the word free because it's technically not free, but I'm sure one of you will mention that. So do you want the pros or the cons, Lisa?
Well, I really could argue both, and I'll go into why I could argue both, but I think I'll choose the con side for now. Because I've been personally affected in the past. A couple of years ago, I broke my back. For maybe listeners who may or may not know.
For our listeners who don't know, Lisa does everything really well, including breaking bones. Like, don't break an arm, don't break a leg, break a back. Like,
that's right.
If I'm Lisa and I'm going to break a bone, I'm going to break a back. Sorry, I'm just trying to throw you off your game.
So for those who might be curious, I broke my transverse process L3 and L4, so the lower part of the lumbar spine. No surgery was required, but I was basically either on crutches or using a walker for close to 6 months. Made it really hard for me to get in front of clients and do what I love. So anyways, I was directly affected by it. So what I can say is that you kind of get what you pay for. And what I mean by that is I went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and it was very hard to get a diagnosis of what had actually happened. Nobody could see things on x-rays for whatever reason, and MRIs, and I went for different MRIs for different areas. And when you have free healthcare in Canada, maybe for our US listeners, they can appreciate this piece. You're in a lot of waiting lines to constantly get whatever you're trying to get, whether it's an MRI or an X-ray. X-rays might be faster. MRIs are a little bit slower. Mm-hmm. So I ended up paying for an MRI so that I could actually get to the front of the list, essentially. And unfortunately, the part of the body that they MRI'd, because they do things in sections and not your whole body, still didn't reveal what had actually happened. So I finally had a bone scan probably 2 months after the initial incident. And that is how they actually diagnosed me. So for that reason, I think that, and this is where it can get a little bit controversial, but for those that can afford to pay for it, you get the quality, you get the, people obviously can get to be seen faster. But of course there's other cons obviously to free healthcare. People obviously do visit hospitals, in the case of free healthcare, a lot more frequently than visiting their doctor, and that can overwhelm the healthcare system and for those who really need it in Canada. So that's a big thing. And I think it just, obviously free healthcare also consumes a large part of the government's budget. And that's not something that in different countries you may have to worry about as much. So I'll leave it as that.
So thank you for that. I am obviously, for the purposes of this discussion, I am pro free healthcare, which probably better stated as single payer healthcare is, I think, the technical term here in Canada. And we're all still in the pandemic, so I'm trying to be a dad and a participant in the roundtable. Anyways, I think in the single rate, payer healthcare really means that everybody has access to it. And so the reality is there are certain things in life that I think are, should be accessed by certain people. And we should have, certain levels of access, but I don't think it should apply to healthcare. I think that anybody that needs to get into the hospital system should be able to do that. They should be able to do that regardless of what their bank account says, regardless of where they come from. Because to me, health, like education, is a human right. Everybody should have a chance to participate and to get good access. And yes, as an engineer, I'd love to work for a private healthcare system because they have more money to spend on sexy hospitals and all that stuff. But it is my belief and contention that, and it also provides, a single payer healthcare provides the government a bit more control over how it's rolled out. And in the case of a pandemic, you can provide a bit more of a controlled approach. You just got to, when you need to kind of in a pandemic kind of recoil and have a bit more of a centralized approach to control, you can do that, I think, better through a single payer healthcare system. So I've just, had exposure to a lot of stories where, if we didn't have access, there'd be some sad stories. So I think the single payer system is a good one. So I'll leave my case there.
Oh, this is a tough one for me. Again, I would love some sort of hybrid system, and the other thing is debt too. Some people, like, especially when, if you don't have this type of healthcare that we have here, something happen, you break a bone, and then you end up with debt and you can't even pay it off, right? So, I think ultimately I would say I would have to go with the pros for this one, even though the wait times drive me bonkers. I think we have it pretty good here. Otherwise, I know, Lisa, you had an unfortunate story. I'm sure there's lots of those, but I'm sure the good outweigh the bad in this case.
Yeah, and what's actually interesting is, so my grandfather, when he was alive, had a quadruple bypass surgery. Of course, here in Canada, it's free. In the U.S., that would have cost over $100,000. So, yeah. As I said at the beginning, I could argue both points, but for me, because of my more recent experience, which was still about 3 years ago, that's why I took that stance.
Now, obviously, incentives would be different for doctors, right? In privatized healthcare than it would be in free healthcare, I guess, as well, maybe. But anyway.
Well, thank you both, and I think it would be most appropriate to close this energy roundtable by thanking our doctors and our nurses and all of our healthcare workers who have been, pardon my French, working their ass off for the last 2 years now in the face of a global pandemic. And I hope the counseling services are there to help them with their PTSD, and I'm not making light of that. I'm saying they have been through hell, and I hope they get the support they need once we get all through this. And thank you to all of them for all they've done, and thank you to our listeners for listening, and thank you to Lisa and Mark for contributing. As always, we'll gather again next week to talk about the news and notes of the week in energy. Thank you all.
No problem.